So please give a warm welcome to Derek Demeter.
Thank you so much, Trisha. Hello, everybody. Hello. Can everyone hear me, right? You don't need to worry about looking at me, though, but you just need to look over here. By the way, so I'm with the Emil Buehler Planetarium at Seminole State College, which is up near Sanford, Florida, so just north of Orlando. And I've been giving this talk a lot lately, probably for some reason, I don't know. I don't know, something. But obviously on April 8th, 2024, there is an eclipse that's happening. And this program is kind of get you primed up for that, what to expect, what's going on, where are the best places to go. And first, if you can't make it, I have a health plan that will help you motivate yourself to 2045 and explain why. And I just want to let you know right now, 2045, eclipse right over Bach Tower, just saying right now. So you got your hands full for the next 20 plus years. So anyways, what we have here is your guide to the 2024 eclipse. How many of you went and saw the 2017 solar eclipse? All right, so I assume everybody who's raised their hand actually went to the path of totality. All right, so for those that have seen the path of totality, what was your reaction? Just give me a response. Just, 360 sunset. Wow, that's how I feel. Yeah. What would you say it's one of the greatest things you've seen in your life? Yeah. Now, a barometer that I give, I love my wife to death, but she is not an astronomer. She has no interest in astronomy really, but she was impressed by it. So that's, just to go show you that, you don't have to be into astronomy to really enjoy eclipse, but it is a truly just amazing experience. Back in October of this year, October 14th, we had a annular eclipse, which is called the Ring of Fire. Annularity means kind of a ring. And that happens every so often as well. And I got a chance to go to Utah to see that. That's also really cool, but you can't beat an actual total solar eclipse. So let's talk about what a solar eclipse is. Just for tongue in cheek, here's a good elementary definition of what an eclipse is here. So here we have the sun, there's the earth, and all of a sudden the moon just goes, look what I can do, and then shows up and then disappears, and the sun's like, what's going on here? And the earth's like, don't worry about it. It's just how the moon is. But essentially this is what's happening during a solar eclipse. There's actually two types, actually technically three if you count the annular eclipse, but there are two types of eclipses. The one that we're going to see on April 8th is a solar eclipse. That's when, of course, the moon obscures the light of the sun. But then there's another type of eclipse that we see every now and then. Does anybody know what that is? A lunar eclipse, also known in the ages of social media, blood moon. In fact, actually, that was coined by a hashtag that was created years ago called #BloodMoon, and the name stuck on ever since. The fun fact about a total lunar eclipse is that the Earth's shadow is cast on the moon, but the fun fact is that the Earth's atmosphere acts like a prism, and just like a prism, it splits the light into its corresponding colors. Now, majority of the color that actually hits the moon is red. But if you were to look at it through a telescope, we have some astronomers here that probably observed a lunar eclipse, you can actually see all the colors of the rainbow towards the edge of the moon. So I like to call it a rainbow unicorn moon, honestly. But you can actually see the rainbow effect caused by the scattering of light in the Earth's atmosphere on the moon, which is pretty cool. But what we're going to be experiencing, again, in April is a total solar eclipse. Now, solar eclipses have been seen by people from all around the world for thousands. I mean, ever since we've been able to look up in the sky, people would notice eclipses. But as far as writing things down, we have Khepri, which is the Egyptian god of the solar eclipse. It said that during an eclipse, the god Ra would bring about his scarab beetle, and essentially the wings of the beetle would unfold. We know that today as the corona. So when you actually look at the eclipse, the corona, they thought they were the wings of a beetle that were opening up. This is Rahu. This is a Vedic or Indian demon god that consumes the sun during an eclipse. And then this is Shamash here, which is the sun god of ancient Babylon. And at that time, basically, and a lot of other cultures too, when an eclipse occurred, this was supposed to be a great turn of events. Now, of course, people in power, they're going to use it to their advantage, right? They're going to see an eclipse, there must be some great thing that's happening, right? but that's not always the case. But anyway, so people have been essentially observing these things for thousands and thousands of years. There was even a great epic battle by the Lydians and the Medes, and these people here actually stopped their entire war due to an eclipse. I mean, think about it. You're fighting, all of a sudden the sun goes, dark. That probably would stop you in your toes too, right? And essentially the war ceased completely after that, which is pretty cool. Or at least that's what was written in the historical documents. So we never know. This gentleman right here is freaking out. Look at that face there. That's what you would do if you had no idea. People had no idea what was going on. I mean, for a very, very long period of time, the science behind an eclipse was very, very mysterious. And, again, the gods did something or something catastrophic or a big turn event was happening. But later on, astronomers got in there and figured out what was going on with eclipses. And essentially, an eclipse is pretty simple. But the fun fact about an eclipse here on Earth is that we are the only planet in the solar system that experiences total solar eclipses. Yep. So nowhere else in the solar system you will experience a solar eclipse like you do here on planet Earth. That's because we have a pretty decently sized moon. Our moon is about a third of the size of the Earth. You can see, by the way, I just want to let you know this is not the scale. All right, so the sun and the Earth are not the scale. This is not a scale. And same thing with the moon, but the moon is relatively smaller than the Earth. But compared to other moons in terms of terrestrial worlds like our planet Earth, our moon actually is pretty decent size. For example, Venus doesn't have a moon, Mercury doesn't have a moon, and Mars has 2 moons. Yes, now don't let the word 2 fool you. These moons, Phobos and Deimos, could both fit inside Polk County. All right, so just to let you know that. In fact, if you traveled from Deimos all the way around the entire surface of Deimos, it's like driving from here to Lake Wales to like Haines City. So yeah, just to give you an idea of how big that moon truly is, right? So on Mars, when they see eclipses, the moons are just not big enough to obscure the light. So our moon is actually fairly large, but that's only half the story. First off, again, not only is this picture not to scale, but it's not the distance either in scale, okay? The distance from the Earth to the Sun is on average 93 million miles. We also call that in astronomy an astronomical unit. So if you ever heard this term AU, that defines by 1 AU is 93 million miles. Now technically our Earth does vary. We call that perihelion and aphelion. We're actually, about a week ago, we were in perihelion. January 4th is when the Earth is closest to the Sun, about 90 million miles. And then we are farthest from the Sun on July 4th at 95 million miles. Now, some of you might have gone over to Tampa or St. Pete or noticed the tides can be stronger during this time of year. And that has to do with the fact that not only when the moon is closest to the Earth, we're also close to the sun, so our tidal forces are a little bit stronger. We get stronger tides in the winter here, and that's because of that fact that we're closer to the sun. And the moon actually gets closer and farther from the Earth. Of course, the moon, we orbit the what? What do we orbit? We orbit the sun, right? And of course, the moon orbits the Earth, right? It takes about 27 days for the moon to orbit around the Earth. Because we're also moving, the shift a little bit does add a couple extra days to our phases of the moon. So we have about 29 days of the moon. 29 sounds a lot like what? 30 days. And ancient people saw the moon, the phases of the moon, as the orchestrator for the months. So the months were really designed by looking at the phases of the moon. And so as the moon is traveling around the Earth and all that stuff, basically at some points in time, the moon does get closest to the Earth. We call that perigee, and sometimes it gets farther away from the Earth. We call it apogee. In modern day terms, in social media terms, we call it a supermoon when it's closest to the Earth, and a micromoon when it's farther away from the Earth. But to most of us, if we were to look at the moon in the sky, it'd be very hard for us to actually see that difference and change. Now, one of the examples of what's going on here is the moon is relatively about the same size as the sun in the sky. Now the moon is only about 250,000 miles away compared to the 93 million miles away the sun is. Some of us might even have cars that have traveled to the moon. 250,000, I mean, But because of the size of the moon relative in the sky to the sun, they're about the same. And most of the time, the moon will block the sun if we get a solar eclipse. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, basically what happens is as the moon goes around the Earth, we see different phases of the moon, right? And when the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth over here, the light from the sun bounces off the surface of the moon, and we see that as a full moon. All right. Now, during a lunar eclipse, it happens during a full moon. It's because the Earth's shadow casts on the moon. Over here, though, notice that all the moon's light is reflected away from the Earth. So we call this, does anyone know what phase this is? New moon. All right. So this is new moon. This is actually the best time of the month for you to go out and observe the night sky, because the moon is a natural light polluter. So you could be in the darkest skies on Earth. If you have a full moon out there, it's like being in the middle of, the city, because of how much light pollution the full moon can create. So here we have the moon here, and now you might be asking yourself, well, hey, Derek, why don't we have solar eclipses every month then, right? Because essentially, if the moon is about the same size as the sun in the sky, well, during a new moon, technically the moon is in the same place, around the same place as the sun. There is an imaginary line in the sky, and if you come to the planetarium sometime, we can actually show it a lot better. There's an imaginary line in the sky called the ecliptic. That's the orbital paths of objects in the solar system. The planets, all the planets have their motions. The sun has their motion. The ecliptic is particularly the motion of the sun over the course of the year. And the moon is very close to that, except the orbit of the moon deviates a little bit as it goes around the Earth per month. So sometimes the moon may be seen just above the sun during a new moon or just below. But there are periods of time in which the orbital plane of the moon and the ecliptic of the sun line up. We call those nodal points. And in those special times, when the right time happens, when you have a new moon, where the sun and the moon are around the same part of the sky, match up, you get a what? Eclipse. So that only happens once or twice a year. So generally, though, the moon is either above the sun or below the sun in the ecliptic during new moon. So if we were to turn off the sun during a new moon, generally you would see the moon either above or below, depending upon its position and all that throughout the year. So hopefully, does that make sense to everybody, what's going on here, the mechanics behind the solar eclipse? And so it's actually fairly simple. Essentially, the moon gets in front of the sun, and you have this, and it lasts for only just a few minutes, because the moon's shadow, by the way, when the sun, when the light is blocked by the sun, the moon shadow is very, very tiny compared to the Earth. When we get a lunar eclipse, the Earth's shadow is much bigger. So people from all around that part of the Earth can see a lunar eclipse. But in the case of a solar eclipse, only a certain percentage of the area of the Earth is actually in that path of shadow of the moon. We call that the path of totality. So if you ever look at some of those pictures that show like just a line going across the United States, that's what they mean by that. That's the line in which the moon's shadow is actually traveling across the surface of the Earth. So that's what's going on there. And of course, the moon's a lot smaller than the Earth, so that's why it has a much smaller area on the Earth's surface. All right, so now that you know kind of the science behind eclipses, now the question is how do you observe an eclipse? Well, first off, we all remember when we were kids. Some of us are still kids, but many of us remember when they were kids. What was the thing that a teacher said to you about looking, or your parents said to you about the sun? Don't look at the sun. Yes, very important to not look at the sun with your eyes. Otherwise, you can burn your eyes, and that would be bad, right? Same thing is effect with the eclipse here. You just don't want to do it. You don't want to do it, but there are ways to look at an eclipse safely, and I'm going to talk about the many ways you can do that. Some of these are very cheap. Some of these can get very fancy. So you have a nice spectrum of different things you can purchase. But the most important thing is not to look at with your eyes. Now this is true except for one period of the eclipse, totality. when the moon is entirely eclipsing the sun for that few minutes of time, you can take off any protection on your eyes and actually look at the sun with just your eyes. But that's the only time. During an annular eclipse, I was telling people you cannot take those things off. Even at annularity, when the moon is completely in front of the sun, there's still enough light peeking out from that area where it's not completely covering the sun that can actually damage your eyes. So what can you do? What can you use? Well, a lot of people use welder's glasses. Number 14, welder's glasses. This isn't my top choice because some welder's glasses are not as built high quality as others. But if you have a pair of number 14 welder's glass, it could potentially be used. These in particular, though, are special solar glasses. These have special filters on the lens that block out 99.9% of the light of the sun, only filtering a little bit of that sunlight to make it safe for your eyes, reducing the glare and the brightness, removing all the ultraviolet, which is actually the most devastating to your eyes, the ultraviolet light. That's why you wear sunglasses during the day, all that stuff. So you can get really fancy ones like this. I've seen a pair like this on Amazon. You can purchase that. I even have ones that look like steampunk glasses, goggles. I mean, you know idea what I'm talking about. Basically, they look like science fiction-y goggles. I have ones, if you remember Star Trek Next Generation, remember Geordi LaForge? I have ones that literally look like Geordi LaForge. You can get them really fancy. You can get solar eclipse glasses that look like Ray-Bans. So you want to be really fashionable, you can go out with this. But the most important thing is you want to have some type of protection over your eye when observing this eclipse. Now, what most people are going to get are these things here, eclipse glasses. How many of you, by show of hands, have eclipse glasses? All right, good. A number of you. If you don't have eclipse glasses, go online and buy them right now because it's going to get wild. In fact, actually, I stopped at 7-Eleven in Champions Gate, and they had a bunch of eclipse glasses over there. I don't know if they still have them, but they were good ones too. I checked. I was like, these are probably knockoff junk glasses. No, they were good. So, maybe they might have them around here. But these are eclipse glasses. They kind of look like, those 3D glasses, right, that people wear. But they have those special filters that block out the light. Now, these eclipse glasses are technically good for about 3 years. Some last a little longer than others, but the standard is about 3 years. So I told people whoever bought glasses during the annular eclipse to hold on to them for the April 8th eclipse. But they're also really great at just looking at the sun. I tell people all the time, there's sunspots, big magnetic, huge storms on the surface of the sun. And they look kind of like chocolate chips on a cookie. Some of these sunspots can get so big you can actually see them with just your eyes. You don't need a telescope, so you can actually observe things. I've even had people do what they call sunspotting of airplanes. They'll figure out the trajectory of an airplane, look at the sun with these sunglasses or solar glasses, and watch a transit of an airplane over the sun, which is kind of cool too. So there's a lot of other ways you can utilize these glasses. I'm an educator. I have a ton of these. I give them to the elementary kids that come out to the planetarium. We look at the sun. They get all excited. So there's other ways you can utilize these glasses while they're still good. You don't want to be this girl right here, though. Notice everybody else is wearing glasses, not this girl here. So you want to make sure you're looking at the glasses, and you want to be like this girl right here, not like this girl. This girl's like, I don't know if I like it. This girl is very impressed by it. But anyways, I'm just judging based on body language there. But either way, this is what most people are going to use during the eclipse viewing. This is what you'll be wearing pretty much through the entirety of the eclipse, except for that little period of time of totality. This is the cheapest thing. Now, there are a couple of reputable eclipse glass companies. My favorite is Rainbow Symphony. Rainbow Symphony does not only eclipse glasses, but they build fantastic solar filters for telescopes. They have special filters for binoculars, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, you can actually get solar filters for your binoculars and your camera. A lot of people like to take photo. People ask me, how do I take a photo of the eclipse? You can actually get a special solar filter to go in front of your camera lens to actually take photos of the eclipse. This is really good because, first off, they design these things for a very long period of time. They also do other eclipse things. There's also eclipseglasses.com, and you probably think, okay, well, that's obvious, Derek, but That's a reputable one. But the most important thing you want to notice with an eclipse glasses is on the side of the glasses, you'll see this thing says ISO. Now, if you're a photographer, I'm not talking about the ISO of a camera, you know, we're talking about the International Standards Organization. They have a special certification that makes those glasses official. Basically, what I mean by that is that these glasses have been tested to meet the standards and quality to allow it to be safe for your eyes. Some of these are not. And back in 2017, there were a bunch of knockoff eclipse glasses that were not approved by the ISO that were being sold, and a lot of people did not have the proper filters for the ISO. So you want to look for that ISO survey. Rainbow Symphony sells them, eclipse glasses. There's a couple of other boutiques like Lunt and 1000 Oaks, and there's a bunch of other local, other astronomy. Celestron even sells eclipse glasses, which is Celestron is a very kind of mainstream telescope manufacturer. You just kind of want to find an astronomy vendor and that caters to designing these glasses. So definitely look at that. And I just want to let you know that 7-Eleven on Championsgate, they did have ISO certified. Okay, so in this case, if you're going to Disney World or something, stop there and grab your eclipse glasses. They may be there, they may not be, I don't know. This was a couple of months ago. But anyway, so this is probably the #1 item. You actually don't really need this to look at the eclipse. You can actually use shadows, so you can use trees, you can use anything that can cast a shadow, and you actually can watch the progression of the eclipse that way. There are special tools like sun spotters that are essentially, they reflect the light of the sun and put it on like a white piece of, a whiteboard or a piece of fabric that project the sun, and you can watch that as well. And that's actually even safer than using the glasses, because you're actually not directly looking at the sun, right? But it's not as fun. You want to look at the sun, right? So this is definitely the top one for most people. And you can do this right here. This, of course, many of us astronomers are going to be out there with our telescopes. This is at the time during this was, I think, actually one of the Mercury transits that we did, but this is actually the mayor of Lake Mary looking through the telescope. You got to have your politicians look at the telescope. But there we have, now this has a special filter called a white light filter. There's different types of solar filters. The most common one is a white light filter because it filters out 99% of the light of the visible wavelengths, all the wavelengths of light, and kind of projects kind of a whitish, yellowish disk of the sun. This is the most common one. You can see we have another one back over here as well. So this is also something, if you're somebody who has a telescope at home, you can also purchase one of these solar filters to go in front of your telescope to observe the eclipse that way as well. So again, as you can see, there are lots of different ways to observe the sun during an eclipse. So what are you going to see? Well, this is a complete time lapse of the 2017 solar eclipse. I was actually in the Sawtooth Mountains. I actually hiked all my gear up to about 8,000 feet in elevation to get away from the smog. Or smoke, because there was a lot of fire smoke that year. Some of us that went there might have been to Oregon or any of these other places, and there was a lot of fire smoke that year. But anyways, this is the progression. So what you're going to see is here we have the sun. So remember I told you about that white light filter? That's essentially what the sun's going to look like with your eclipse glasses. It's going to look like a big giant cookie, monster cookie. I was actually told I got a complimentary monster cookie for doing this talk. So just think monster cookie, all right, or sugar cookie, whatever. But anyway, so here we have this, there's the sun, and what you'll see over a period of time is you'll see the moon slowly migrate all the way through the disk of the sun until eventually you reach totality. And then, of course, everything is backwards from there, right? And it lasts about an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending upon the position or where you're observing the sun. But most people usually see this, and they're done. And what happens is you'll see thousands and thousands of people here, and then when this happens, everybody leaves. And it's only like 3 people like me that are dedicated to the very end to watch it. But, it is what it is. So some of the things that you're going to notice if you have a telescope or, again, like me, taking photos of the eclipse, some of the things that are really cool is you can prove that the moon is not smooth. It's actually made up of mountains and valleys and craters, and it's not completely smooth. And when the moon almost completely obscures the sunlight, you can actually see some of that sunlight peeking through those craters and mountains. We call that Bailey's beads. and you can see kind of how, if you look closely at this image, you can actually see those valleys and mountains on the rim of the moon here. And of course, also what happens during this time as well is there's actually a layer of the sun just above the photosphere. Photosphere is the surface of the sun. The layer above the sun is called the chromosphere. And in the chromosphere, I'm not going to get into too much science on this, but the sun generates a tremendous amount of magnetic fields because it's basically a big ball of plasma. A lot of fluid dynamics are happening there. There's a lot of dynamo effect. You're getting a lot of magnetic fields. You're getting a lot of magnetic fields. And these magnetic fields sometimes can push material, hot hydrogen gas, up into space, and it can suspend it above the surface. And you get these prominences, these large prominences. You can actually watch in time. These prominences get bigger and smaller. Sometimes they'll connect together. Sometimes they'll be ejected out. Really cool. And you can actually, normally you'd have to use a special telescope filter to see these prominences. We have one that's called a hydrogen alpha telescope. It looks at a very small wavelength of light. Very narrow wavelength light called hydrogen alpha that allows you to look at the chromosphere. This, on the other hand, though, this right here, you can actually see it with your eyes. Really, really, really cool. And you can see that during that solar eclipse right there. And of course, here is totality. Now, of course, projectors, they don't, I have this image here on my Instagram, also on my social media, other social media, but this right here, this is the total solar eclipse of 2017. You can actually see the moon itself, the shadow of the moon. What I did is I took multiple exposures and then stacked them together to form this image. But this is the closest thing I saw with my telescope during an eclipse, because the telescope can let enough light in where you can actually see a little bit of the moon due to earth shine. There's actually a little bit of reflected light from the earth back to the moon. We call it earth shine. You can actually see that. And this right here, this is the corona. Now, the corona, not the beer, but the corona is a large expanse of those magnetic fields. And material can get shut off the sun at millions of miles an hour and get superheated up by the effects of the magnetic fields. And the temperature of this can be about 2 to 3 million degrees. And the only time you can see the corona is an eclipse. During an eclipse, this is the only time you can see the sun's corona. So this is also another amazing thing to see during that. So you got a lot of stuff to look at during this small window of time. During the 2017, the max extension was about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. This eclipse on April 8th, the max is going to be about 4 minutes and like 30 seconds. So you have a little bit of time. But for those that went to observe it, it felt like it was like 3 seconds, right? Yeah, it went way too fast. But hopefully you get to see all this stuff. Now, let's say you have the worst luck in the world, like my friend did. They went out somewhere and it was cloudy, right? Yeah, it was cloudy. But, okay, so you went and saw it cloudy, but you still got to experience something unique, right? For example, what you're going to notice when you watch an eclipse, for those that haven't seen it, you're going to see that the light gets a little odd. It starts to get almost like sepia toned in a way, and that's called eerie light. That's because we're only letting in a very small amount of the sunlight from the traveling of the moon. Well, the other thing you're going to notice is that during an actual total eclipse, it gets dark. Yeah, and you can see some of the brighter stars. You can see some of the planets. In fact, during the 2024 eclipse, this year, there's actually going to be 5 visible planets up in the sky then. So Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn will all be up in the sky during this time. Now Mercury and Saturn are a little bit more challenging, but if you know where to look, you'll be able to see them. Venus and Jupiter are going to be really, really easy to see, and Mars is kind of in the middle. But the other thing you're going to notice is that there's a 360-degree field of view of a sunset-like effect. Incredible. But again, if you have cloudy skies, you're still going to feel that darkness, or you're going to see the darkness. You're also going to notice that the birds and the insects, the ones that start to come out during twilight hours, will realize they'll think it's twilight. You'll start to hear birds chirping, insects making noise, all kinds of stuff. Really, really cool. So when this is happening, don't just pay attention to the eclipse itself. I mean, it's hard not to, but also just pay attention to your surroundings as well. Did you all notice that when you were? It still had a really cool effect. So don't get let down completely that it was cloudy. You still get to kind of immerse yourself in other aspects as well.
It was cool. You could see the clouds away from us were not in the path of totality.
Oh, really?
So you could see they were still
That's cool. Now that's something unique. Yeah, that's something I never thought about. So you can kind of see that motion as the moon's shadow is slowly drifting across the surface of the Earth. That's really cool. Yeah. Also, if you're a birder, if it's cloudy out, that's when the birds come out, is around twilight. So you got your chance to catch that rare painted bunting or something like that, that you've been waiting for 1,000 years. But that's another thing to think about. If you're cloudy, at least you get to do something like that. But the other thing is temperature. For example, I was in Idaho, and it was getting kind of warm out. I mean, you're up in the mountains in August. It's still kind of cold, but you're still direct sunlight, so it's all that. So I was wearing a short sleeve shirt. And when totality happened, I was so jazzed up with adrenaline that it didn't feel like anything until I was calming down, and it dropped to about 10 degrees outside. And I'm in just a short sleeve shirt, and I'm like, why is it so cold? Because again, you're starting to see that temperature. So as the eclipse occurs, you'll notice that the temperature will drop more and more as we get closer to totality. So a lot of things are happening during that time period as well. All right, so let's talk about the eclipse itself. How many of you already know where you're going for this eclipse? All right, so just yell it out if you tell me where you're going. Where are you going? Arkansas, okay, me too. Texas. New York. Indianapolis, okay. All right, so I clearly know that the people that said in New York, Indianapolis, you probably family out there. That's where you live, or maybe? Because, okay, you're just going there because you want to go. Okay, all right. Fingers crossed for you. However, I will say this, because of El Nino, it tends to be clearer up north than it is down south. As you can see with Florida this past year, it's been terrible. Honestly, people say, where's the best place to go? And honestly, I tell people, wherever you can afford to go to see the eclipse is where you got to go. Because, you had all the money in the world, I would probably choose historically Texas and South Arkansas, and Mexico, if you can afford to go into Mexico. Tends to be better weather during that time of year, but all bets are off. We're in El Nino right now, and during this in the southeast tends to get wetter and cloudier during this time period. So it might actually be a better idea to head further north for this one. But again, it's really the best advice I can give anybody is, if you can, be mobile. Don't just stay in one spot and hope. Look at the weather. Become a weather person for the next 48 hours and look at the radar, look at where the clouds and predict the models and really make the best guess. Me and my wife are going, we are literally going to be sleeping in our car the night before because we are going to be driving wherever it may be clear. I have a reason for that. First off, I'm going to be live streaming the eclipse. So I have a job to fulfill, so I'm going to do the best I can. But really, honestly, what you need to know is you need to know where the path of totality is. So this line here, this dark red band, is the path of totality. That dotted line is the center of totality. So anywhere along this area is where you want to go. Now, I had somebody contact me during the 2017 eclipse, and they asked me, hey, I want to go to Savannah. Now, I want to let you know that the path of totality was going through South Carolina at the time. They were like, we're in Savannah. And we're going to drive another 10 miles north. You think that's good enough? And I said, no. Even if you're at 99%, you're not going to see totality. You're not going to see what people will see in that path of totality. Now, you didn't listen, and you know what happened? You didn't see it. So you definitely got to get in that path of totality to see the real deal. Now, the closer you get to the center line, the longer totality is. So if you're on the very edge, you'll have the least amount of time for totality. Now you're still going to see totality, and it's still going to be over, a minute or so, a minute and a half, but it's not going to be as long as what you would be in the middle here. So basically, take a look at the path. You can actually go to a website called Time and Date, and they have a fantastic eclipse, interactive eclipse map that's actually overlaying Google Maps. And you can look at exactly where it is. So if you're like, hey, I want to go to Arkansas, hey, I want to go to Texas, I want to go to New York, I want to go all the way up to Labrador, why not in April? Go out there and look and see where you can go, So really, I tell you, people say, oh my, I don't have the money to go out and see the eclipse. Well, again, you're still going to see the eclipse here in Florida, but you're only going to see about 60%. But if you can afford, even if just the gas alone, just to drive and sleep in your car, it is worth the experience. It is worth the experience. And that's what we're doing. We're literally going to get in the car. We actually have a place to stay in Arkansas, but again, if the weather's bad there, we're gonna book it down somewhere else. You have, and some of us might not have the physical ability to sleep in their car, but I'm just saying that, if you are somebody who's worried about finances and can't do it, there are ways to make it happen. There are places that you could stay. There's family members that are nearby. If, like, for example, I have a friend of mine who lives in Michigan, or has family members who live in Michigan. They're only an hour away from the path of totality. So try to maybe there's family members that are only a couple hours from there that you can stay with. A couple-hour drive is a lot easier than driving, 15 hours or whatever. So just think about that. Strategically think about it. Plenty of Airbnb still available. I actually searched yesterday in some of these places. If you have an RV, great place to bring that out there. So again, if you have the means, if you have any ability to do it, try to do it as best as you can, because this is an amazing experience. But what are people going to see from Florida? This is what the totality will look like from. I'm sorry.
Before you go any further,
yes.
can you put that map back
Yes.
again? Because of time zones, what time would we be looking at? We live just about the top corner of them where it says Maine.
Oh, Maine. Okay. I think it's around. I have to actually look that up, but I think it's somewhere in early afternoon, like 1 o'clock, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, somewhere around that time period. But I need to let me after the program. Let me just quickly check for you, and I'll get that time for you there on that. But it starts kind of in the early. It starts in the morning down here, and it kind of heads into the afternoon as it goes towards the East Coast. So yeah, so sometime around that time period, which. So this is what it's going to look like from Florida. Actually, this is what it's going to look like from Sanford, Lake Mary. But where Lake Wales isn't that much different in position. So it's going to look real about the same. You're going to see about 60% of the eclipse. We call this the Pac-Man eclipse because it kind of looks like Pac-Man. But this is still very, very cool because you're seeing some astronomical object like the moon block the light of something else. And if you cannot go anywhere, no matter what, still get out there, get those glasses and look up. Even if you see a partial eclipse, it's still amazing. The fact that we can see this happen here on planet Earth, the only place on Earth in the solar system you can see eclipses like this. All right, let's talk about the last thing. We'll wrap it up here. We have to talk about 2045. Yes. What you are seeing here is the path of totality, 2045, August 12th. Yes, August 12th. Thank you, nature, for the worst time in Florida. Why can't we have like a January one? That would be great, right? Well, no, we got August. All right, so here's Lake Wales, kind of over here, right in the center line. Start planning now. Start planning now. Keep those memberships going. This will be the. Can you imagine a picture of totality over the tower? It's going to be the best picture in the world, right? It's going to be the best picture in the world. But if you live anywhere, pretty much along the peninsula of Florida, you're going to see it. Here I am up here, really good. Notice the time, 6 minutes and 30 seconds of totality, of total darkness over Bok Tower. Yes, you got to think of a song that could be played during the eclipse. That's 6 minutes and 30 seconds. So you can see here, we're going to have a pretty epic event in 2045. So some of us might hopefully be around long enough to see it. But if you'll have kids, there are kids in here that are going to be definitely going to see this, and this is their chance to plan ahead, way ahead, right? But this is going to be the next biggest eclipse here in the United States, at least particularly here in Florida. We are going to have our chance to see the eclipse from Florida. So again, right here at Bok Tower, you are essentially in the center line. So just think about that. So there you go. But anyway, so that's kind of a basic overview of an eclipse. Hopefully that just kind of primed you up to get ready. My favorite part of these presentations is always opening up to questions.
What causes the shadows, like you see really strange shadows during an eclipse, like multiple shadows.
Oh, so the question is, you see these strange kind of like almost like patterned shadows?
Like you'll see like 3 or 4 shadows of, like if you're holding something up, you'll have like 3 or 4 shadows.
So yeah, I mean, so the shadows are produced by, so you have atmospheric conditions happening as well. So the atmosphere is kind of like the ocean in a way. So it diffuses the shadow a little bit. So that's why you tend to see a kind of a difference in the shadow, because of the fact that the atmosphere of Earth is also playing effects on that as well. Kind of like a lens, if you will.
Who's next?
How wide is the band of totality? And does it vary in locations, or is it the same?
How big is the band of totality? About a few hundred miles. And it generally stays around that size, because it's more about the moon's shadow rather than like its position. But generally the moon has a plane that it kind of orbits around, so the shadow shape doesn't change a whole lot. But it's within an average of about a couple hundred miles.
So you don't need to be on that center line to see.
You don't, but here's what's going to happen if you're not, let's say you're on the very edge of that path. The moon is going to be offset just a little bit to where it's not going to cover directly the path of the sun. So you're going to actually reduce the amount of time that you'll actually get full totality. So if you're right in the center, it's going to completely cover the sun, and it's going to stay like that a lot longer than if it's offset a little bit, and there's going to be a little bit of light peeking out from the bottom end shorter. So that's something to consider as well. But as long as you're in a path of totality, you will see totality. But it's going to greatly reduce the amount of time compared to right in the middle. Okay, yes?
Do you know why we see only 60%, and for like why the moon only shows us so much from the totality line?
So the question is so I'll answer, there's actually 2 questions. The first question is, why do we only see 60% here in Florida? So remember we talked about the orbits, right? So the position in which the moon is placed in such a way where it lines up with the sun is along that path of totality. But as you move further away from that on Earth, it shifts a little bit in the sky. So and this is really great to show you in a planetarium. And we actually are going to be doing a program at our planetarium in the next couple of months about this, so we can really show you. But basically, as you travel off, like let's say I'm looking at you right now. As I move this way, you look like you're shifting away, right? That's exactly what's happening. So that's why we only see 60%, because the moon offsets a little bit to the point of where only 60% of it is actually covering the sun. And then the further away you move from that path of totality, it's going to shift further and further away. The second question was, why is it only like 2 minutes, right? Is that what you were going to ask?
Why is it only for so long for us?
Why is it only so long for us? And that has to do with the fact, it all has to do with shape and scale. So, and the velocity of the moon. So the moon's traveling very fast around the Earth. So it's going to be traveling. If you were to actually turn off the sun and speed up the time by like even just twice the time of normal time, you can actually see the moon slowly move. So based on the size and the angle and all that, and how long it takes for the moon to travel per hour, that leads to how long the actual eclipse is. Now when it's closer to the equator, the path is longer. So since the path is longer in the sky, since it's shifted down a little bit, it has more time to stay in front of the sun. So it all depends on the angle and the distance. So there's a lot of like variables on that.
Okay, one more.
Do you happen to know how fast is this center of the eclipse moves?
How fast the center moves? It's about this. It's the same for any location on the center line. It's just that the moon's offset a little bit as you get further away from the center. So the length of time it's going to be in the actual the moon's going to block the sun is reduced. So if it's in the center, it's going to be greater amount of time. So like for example, this one is about 4 minutes and 30 seconds in the center line. But if you are at how fast does it move? 4 minutes. 4 minutes and 30 seconds it takes to. Oh, how long is it back?
How fast?
Because of the, okay.
It's the speed.
Yeah, the
Speed of the shadow. I think it's like. I think it's well into like the couple of miles per second kind of thing. It's really, really fast. Really, really fast. Yeah, we're talking very, very quickly. You can actually see, that's like you said with the clouds, you can actually see that velocity. So it's a couple of miles a second. I don't know the exact, I'll have to look up the exact number, it's just like the exact time, but it's in the matter of miles per second, the rate of the shadow as it travels.
you can catch it just by driving fast.
No, but airplanes have done that though. Like fighter jets have the velocity enough to do that. Actually, my friend was in one of those during the 2017. He was actually chasing the Eclipse, which is really cool, in like a supersonic jet. So, yeah.
Let's give Derek a warm thank you.
Thank you.